The moment you pull back your energy, they start to feel your absence. The second you stop needing validation, they question why you're no longer asking for it. When you vanish, not physically, but mentally, they suddenly desire your presence. This strange human behavior isn't just social mystery or dating psychology. It points to something much deeper about consciousness, control, and how people connect. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who went deeper into the psyche than nearly anyone in the 20th century, spotted this truth long ago. But to him, it wasn't just odd behavior. It was a real expression of key psychological truths that quietly shape all our relationships. And when you grasp these truths, your view of both yourself and other people starts to shift. Jung saw that craving attention, praise, and connection often leads to their absence, exactly because you're chasing them. But when you stop that chase, when you mentally pull back, you set off deep reactions in others without even trying. What seems like a case of "we want what we can't have" actually reveals the deep psychology of projection, psychic force, and hidden awareness Jung spent decades decoding. This isn't about mind games. It's about learning the real strength that appears once you no longer base your identity on what others think. It's about seeing how stepping back draws people in, and how that reflects something core about how humans relate. Most of all, it shows how this insight can free you from the traps of neediness and emotional addiction to others' approval. Jung didn't just imagine this. His insights came from years of working with people stuck in endless loops of craving and rejection, and from his own path to psychological wholeness. What he uncovered explains why disappearing makes you noticeable, and how that odd truth might be the doorway to real relationships and inner strength. To understand why this works, we need to look at what Jung saw as a kind of economy of human attention. In the real world, goods are limited by nature, but attention works differently. It's shaped by how the mind judges value, based on subtle signals of scarcity. Jung noticed that what we push against tends to grow stronger. This idea holds especially true in the realm of approval and connection. When you hunt these things from others, you show two things at once: that you want them and that you don't already have them. This sets up a psychological imbalance. Your visible hunger makes the thing seem more valuable, while also making others less eager to give it. Jung understood this reaction isn't planned or cold, it's automatic. He once said that the things we find annoying in others are mirrors of things we haven't faced in ourselves. The person desperately chasing validation frustrates people because they awaken memories of their own hidden neediness. This creates a quiet urge to pull away, not to get closer. But when you stop chasing, when you mentally vanish, you interrupt that cycle. You suddenly seem full, not lacking. This shift opens up space and mystery. People feel, even without knowing why, that something they assumed was always available is now rare. That makes it more appealing. Your absence becomes more noticeable than your presence ever was. And this isn't just a change in attitude. It follows a deep rule of human energy that Jung called libido, not in the Freudian sense of sexual drive, but as a general force of the mind. Jung once wrote, "Where your fear is, there is your task." When you take the mental power you used to spend on seeking attention and turn it inward, you start to change from the inside. Others can feel that shift. What makes this so powerful is that it's real. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about no longer needing to be gotten. The pull others feel comes from a new truth. Your energy is no longer up for grabs. Their minds, without knowing it, adjust their view of you. What was once overlooked is now quietly valued. This change isn't fake. It can't be faked. It's the result of turning real energy away from others' approval and toward your own. Growth Jung saw another force behind this: projection. When two people meet, it's like mixing chemicals. Both change. When you step back mentally, that invisible chemical reaction shifts. Jung said projection happens when we unknowingly place parts of ourselves onto other people. If you're always looking for approval, you become the perfect screen for others to cast their own needy shadows onto. Your need reflects their need, so they back away, trying to avoid what they see in you. But when you stop needing, those projections don't stick. They bounce back, and this makes people uneasy. They feel a need to reconnect, not to find you, but to avoid dealing with the parts of themselves they accidentally projected onto you. This explains why people who ignored you when you wanted them suddenly show up when you move on. It's not random. It's a deep shift in how their unconscious sees you. Jung saw this in therapy too. Patients often grew the most when the therapist pulled back. The silence gave room for their own mind to move. Jung said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There's no one-size-fits-all path to growth. Stepping back breaks the usual roles and lets people show up as they really are. When your withdrawal is honest, not forced, you stop being a mirror for others' weaknesses and instead become a mystery they can't explain. This shift triggers something else entirely. They no longer project weakness onto you, but possibility. Not because you act strong, but because you've become strong on the inside. That shift doesn't go unnoticed, even if it's never spoken. Jung believed we're all connected through a shared psychic blueprint. This explains why we feel drawn to certain people without knowing why. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you truly become mentally independent, you don't just act differently, you change what people sense in you, deep down. That lack of need shows up as quiet strength, and strength, even unspoken, draws people in. Jung saw that this happens through deep mental patterns we all share. He called them archetypes. These patterns shape how we see the world and each other. A person who stands firm triggers the archetype of wisdom, strength, or inner wholeness. Someone begging for approval awakens the archetype of a lost or broken child. These impressions happen fast and under the radar, but they guide how others react to you. And this is why fake confidence doesn't work. Jung said, "You don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Real power comes from facing the weak parts of yourself, not hiding them. People can feel the difference between real wholeness and a mask. One pulls them in, the other leaves them unmoved. This is why deep self-work draws attention without effort. It activates something primal in others, a sense that you carry a truth they want, but don't yet have. When you stop chasing and start becoming, you don't need to speak. They already feel it. What Jung referred to as the true self possesses a presence that cannot be fabricated by conscious self-presentation. The first transformation begins with the withdrawal of energy previously used to maintain appearances. This leads to the integration of shadow material, those rejected aspects of the self that Jung believed, once embraced, create psychological depth. This integration results in a kind of inner gravity that others subconsciously sense. The pull of your integrated self replaces the need to seek attention. It's this hidden shift, where conscious seeking ceases, that amplifies your inner resonance. The next stage is the emergence of the self-archetype, Jung's term for the central, organizing force of the psyche that transcends ego. When you stop acting from ego-driven motives, space opens up for this deeper identity to manifest. People respond not to your absence, but to the depth of what now quietly remains. A presence not born of performance, but of alignment with something greater. This is why spiritual practices often emphasize solitude and silence. They are not tricks for gaining attention, but means of returning to essence. Jung saw these disciplines as psychological maps, not merely religious rituals, noting their repeated theme, stepping back as a path to true presence. This principle becomes evident in our relationships. When you stop engineering others' perceptions, authentic connection becomes possible. You're no longer performing, but actually present. This level of presence draws others more than any polished social act, because it evokes an archetypal recognition of completeness. Jung also distinguished strength from power in ways that illuminate this phenomenon. Power tries to control externals. Strength arises from within, from wholeness and sovereignty. Power is conditional. Strength remains regardless of conditions. Where wisdom governs, there's no war between thought and emotion. Jung observed that strength doesn't mean avoiding weakness. It means absorbing it into a more unified whole. Real strength appears when energy is no longer spent chasing approval, but redirected inward. Jung called this process active imagination, intentionally engaging with inner material to understand why we seek validation in the first place. This is not just retreat, but a turning inward that leads to full integration. That's why authentic disappearance isn't like playing hard to get. One masks dependency with tactics, the other transcends dependency altogether. People feel this difference. It's not about behavior, it's about being. The strength born from this process invites what Jung named synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that mirror your inner development. You begin to notice and align with opportunities you were blind to while chasing validation. This isn't mystical, it's perceptual and psychological readiness. It's not just in relationships, you see it in every field. The writer who stops writing for applause often finds their voice. The professional who stops performing climbs more naturally. The artist who lets go of judgment creates their most honest work. In each case, ceasing to seek is paired with the surfacing of true ability. Jung's view of psychological movement was cyclical, not fixed. He saw the pattern of withdrawal and return as essential. Everything worthwhile has a cost, and nothing costs more than becoming who you truly are. Pulling back is necessary, but not final. Eventually, the new self engages again, but this time, from a deeper place. The withdrawal that initially draws others' curiosity isn't the end goal, it's a developmental phase. Complete retreat contradicts our relational nature. Jung understood that real consciousness is always tied to others. So the point isn't vanishing forever, but returning with fuller authenticity. This cycle reveals itself in all deep bonds. Parents must step back at key stages to support their child's independence. Partners must preserve inner autonomy while choosing connection. Friends must hold boundaries while fostering real closeness. Presence and absence in rhythm make connection real. Jung saw this even in therapy. The best therapist is deeply present, yet self-contained, not dependent, but fully engaged. Disappearing at the right time can actually provoke breakthroughs. This applies to leadership too. Great leaders don't seek approval. Their authority isn't imposed, it emanates. Because they don't need validation, they earn respect. This is the paradox. Presence arises from self-possession. Jung believed the greatest freedom comes from withdrawing energy from external validation. It's liberation from the most common form of psychological enslavement. To accept oneself completely, he said, is terrifying, because it ends the game of seeking. But from that acceptance comes sovereignty. Freedom comes in layers. First is breaking the habit of projecting unwanted traits onto others. Reclaiming that material creates inner wholeness. Then comes freedom from what Jung called participation mystique, the unconscious merging of your boundaries with others. True sovereignty lets you stay distinct while connecting. Finally, there's access to the transcendent function, the mind's ability to reconcile opposites and create new awareness. When you stop trying to prove or perform, inner space opens for deeper truths to emerge. What once seemed like irreconcilable parts of yourself begin to harmonize. This deep reconciliation changes how you relate. Jung said the meeting of two people is like a chemical reaction. Both are changed if it's real. Sovereign connection transforms rather than completes. It's not about filling gaps, but generating something new. This freedom reaches beyond relationships. Jung taught that the great task of life is to become yourself. To do that, you must sometimes disappear, not physically, but psychologically, stepping away from outer definitions and returning to inner truth. What you find during these retreats doesn't beg for recognition, yet often draws it, because clarity attracts, not through demand, but by resonance. This psychological sovereignty also releases you from the exhausting job of curating impressions. When you no longer need reactions to define yourself, your energy flows elsewhere. What you once used to manage perception now fuels creation. It becomes available for art, work, insight, connection. All of this points towards something beyond disappearance itself. A higher state of being where neither withdrawal nor engagement is tactical. Instead, both arise naturally from your centered presence. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." That awakening is presence without seeking, a stillness that magnetizes. People don't respond to your absence. They respond to what emerges when the false you vanishes. This state still includes the need for connection. But that need no longer distorts your expression. You're no longer driven to be seen. You simply are, and others are drawn to the fullness of that being. From here, connection becomes a gift, not a requirement. You hold your center and extend from it freely. Jung called this individuation, the unfolding of your unique wholeness. Knowing your own darkness allows you to hold space for others' darkness without fear or need. You're no longer trying to have relationships. You are in relationship. Naturally, connection is no longer something you manage, but something that arises. People want to see you not because you've vanished, but because what's shown up in your place is more real than ever before. In this state, the paradox isn't resolved, it's lived. You are most yourself and most united, most inwardly free and most outwardly connected. The disappearance that pulls others in isn't a trick, but the absence of performance. And that absence makes room for your real presence to emerge. There is, however, a further dimension, one even Jung only partially outlined. A level where psychological sovereignty becomes a cultural force, shaping collective consciousness and not just personal bonds. This is why the disappearance dynamic operates not only in personal relationships, but across entire societies. True liberation within, the individual has ripple effects far beyond the self.